So let's first take a look at where we left off last time. We had just completed the exercise that was discussing about the spreader. So there's a new syntax which is introduces this three-dot notation that we refer to as the spreader operator, right? And it's used in both arrays and objects, right, to be able to copy, right, a one data structure on top of another data structure, right? So you can it can be used to copy the content of one array. So here's array one, right? And here we are spreading array one into, right, array two. So array two only would have maybe 4, 5, 6, but we are appending or prepending, right, the content of array one, right, in front of array two. Okay. So now that array two in the end we'll have the content of both array one, right, and then we'll have 1, 2, 3 at the beginning, and then 4, 5, 6 at the end. Right? So that's applicable in for arrays, but it's also applicable also for objects, right? So in here we have one object one, that has properties A, B, and C, right? And then we are spreading object one, right, into object two. So basically, it's equivalent to grabbing the content of object one, right, and pasting it right in front of here in object two. It's equivalent to doing that, right? And now in arrays, the elements right here, 1, 2, 3, and 4, 5, 6, the actual values don't really matter, right? They don't. What matters is the position, right? Here, 1, 2, 3 are going to be in front of 4, 5, 6, right? So 1, 2, 3 comes first, and then 4, 5, 6. So the position of the elements matters. Now, in objects, the positions of these properties doesn't matter, right? So for instance, if you have B in the end here at the end, right? It's the same, right? It's the same object. It's like a set where the order, right, of the property elements inside of the map, right, doesn't really matter, right? What does matter is the names, right? The names of the properties, right? The names of the property is equivalent, right, to the position of elements, right, in an array. Right? In an array, the positions are 0, 1, 2, 3, and so on and so forth. Here, the positions are A, C, and B, right? But there's no real care of where they appear. Now, it does matter. The positions does matter when you apply the spreader operator, right, with objects, right? In the sense that, in general, it would behave the same way, right? It's as if you would be copying the content of one object, copying into the other object, like that, as if you would be copying and pasting the content. Okay. Now, in general, right, if the names of the properties are different, right, from object one and object two, then there's no problem, right? You would just have A, C, and B, right, just appear right in front of here of object two. No problem. There is no inconsistency. Remember, the names of the property are like positions, right? And just like in an array, you can't have two elements in the same position, right? An object cannot have properties of the same name, right? So in this case, for instance, where we take object one and we spread it over object three, you'll notice that we are trying to spread object one, which has property B, right, onto object three, which also has a property B. See that? So there would be a collision, right? It would be equivalent to copying this, right, and pasting it in here, right? That is not syntactically correct since you have two properties named B, right? So that is considered to be a collision, right, of properties, and so the spreader operator resolves this collision by in the order these properties were declared, right? Since B4, right, was declared after, B4 was after, was declared after B2, then this one, then before B4 overrides the one that's coming in, right? Last one wins, basically, right? So the end would look like that, right? So it would be B4, okay? So yeah, so you have to be careful. And when these collisions happen, now the collisions only happen when you're working. You can only have collisions if you are working with objects, right? Because again, the names have to be unique. Whereas in arrays, you can't have collisions, right? Because always the positions are just going to be unique, right? Everybody's going to fall in their own particular. There's no way for the operator to cause, right, two elements wanted to be in the same place at the same time, right? There's no way to do that. But in objects, you can, right? Because you could repeat the name of the property. So be careful. And in the quizzes, I'll probably ask you something like that, where I'll give you different operations, right? Where there'll be several cases in which one property overrides another property and then overrides another property, right? And then I ask you, well, what is B? Is B 4 or 2, right? So you can expect questions like that in the quiz or exams and whatnot. Everybody good with the spreader operator? Right. We use this operation very many times, right? It's a very common operation, right? That we're going to be using throughout the course. Okay. All right. So let's take a look at another very interesting operator. Right. So we did the spreader operator. So now let's take a look at another operator called the destruct operation. Right. So the destruct operator. Let me copy that. Let's create a component for this. So let's see. We'll call let's make this a little smaller. And let's see. Oh, why did I put spreading here? I didn't mean to put it in here. Okay, so we'll do the destructing, right? And let's copy it. Let's paste it in here. So this is another operation that we're going to be using quite a bit, right? So here we have an object person, right, that is using the JSON syntax, right, to declare an object of two properties, right? Name John and age is 25, right? It has two properties. Now, when the curly operator, right, is used on the right-hand side of the equal sign, we can say that the operation, the curly operators is being used to construct, to build, right, an object out of its constituent pieces, right? The pieces are the name property, the string name property, and the number age property. Make sense? So the curly bracket on the right-hand side of the equal sign, it is constructing the object. Well, you can also use the curly bracket operator on the left side of the equal sign. Okay, and so on the left side of the equal sign, we say that this is the curly brackets are destructing the object, right? So notice that the object that is being destructed is person. Person is on the right hand side. Okay, and so the curly brackets on the left side, what they're doing is that they are extracting or they are destructing those properties that are in the person. Person has properties name and age, right? Person has name and age. And here we are destructing or extracting those variables, right? And we are declaring brand new variables, well, constants. We're declaring brand new constants. This would work also if it would be a let. So it could be constants, it could be a variable, right? And it's setting, it's initializing each of these constants, right? Name and age, right? With the values of the matching properties in the person. So name ends up with the value John, and age ends up with the value 25, right? Notice that these are brand new constants or variables, right? Whereas these are not variables, right? These are properties within an object in a constant called person. So person contains two properties, not variables. The variable or the constant is person, which has two properties, name and age. here we are declaring two brand new constants, right, that happen to have the same name as the property. Well, they have to have the same name, otherwise this would not work, right? So for instance, if I put here a property that doesn't exist inside a person, right, the compiler is complaining, right, saying, hey, there is no property SDF inside a person. Don't bother, right? This would not compile or be undefined, right? So it only works with properties that we know are existing inside of the person object. Okay, everybody good? All right. Now the way we know to extract these from the properties is because they match the name, right? Not necessarily because of the order in which they're declared, right? So if this were backwards, right? If this were age like that and name, this would work just the same way, identical, right? Because it's not by position, but it's by the matching of the names. Everybody good? Now, this syntax right here is identical to doing something like this, right? Where you would declare the constants, each in its own line, right? You could say name is equal to person.name and age is equal to person.age. I mean, age is equal to person.age, yes? So this syntax is identical to splitting it up into two different lines, okay? And now this new version of JavaScript is all about adding the capability of being much more terse, much more compacting the language. So creating operations that make it so much easier to write the same thing, but just in a smaller set number of lines, right? So if we had 3 or 4 properties that we want to extract, we would need 3 or 4 different lines. Whereas this syntax is so much more compact, right? You can just list the properties that you want and use a curly operator to extract them. Yes, everybody good? All right, so we're going to be using this syntax everywhere, right? It's a very, very common syntax. Okay, all right. So again, using the curly bracket, the order of the declaration of these constants doesn't matter, right? The name matters. So the destruct operation also works for arrays, right? And so here we have an array that has 3 items, 1, 2, and 3, right? And again, the square brackets on the right-hand side of the equal sign, we can consider or name it as that they are constructing or they're building a data structure, an array data structure, right, out of the constituent pieces, right, which are the items here, 1, 2, and 3, those 3 strings, right? And they're being assigned to a brand new constant called numbers. Yes? Well, if the square brackets on the right-hand side of the equal sign are used for constructing, well, if you use the square brackets, but on the left side of the equal sign, then we say that these are destructing an array, right? So here's the array that is being destructed, the numbers, right? And we are extracting the items inside of the array, but we are extracting it by position, right? Whereas the destruction of objects, the order doesn't matter, right? In the arrays, it does, right? Because in the object, the destruction happens by name, right, of the property. Whereas in an array, we don't have names, right? We have position 0, 1, 2, and so on and so forth. Right. So here the first item, right, this first constant that we are declaring gets the value of the first item in the input array, right? And this is also important that the initial array or the original array or the change, right? We're not doing anything to the object, right? Or we're not destroying the object, like the name suggests, destruct. We're not destroying the object. We're not destroying the array, right? Those are unchanged, unmodified. We're not doing anything to it, right? We are just extracting values from those arrays and we are assigning them to local constants or local variables, right? So first here gets the value 1, second gets the value 2, and third gets the value 3. Pretty good? Right. So if we introduce that to our lab 3 here, and the destructing And there we have destructing, and we have the each one of the values, right, of the values of the name, the age, right, and the different first, second, and third just printed out. Okay. All right. Any questions there? Does it make sense? All right, yeah. So this is a syntax that you'll see over and over and over, right? Used heavily, right? Using React.js, right? And components, creating components, big objects and whatnot. All right, so a very common use of this syntax, right? Of the destructing syntax, right? Is used inside of the when you're using functions, when you're passing things to functions. Okay, right, and I think this is just a, okay. So let's copy this example, right, and let's talk about it. New here, right, and then let's copy the content. So here we have two functions, and I guess these two functions could, let's see, this could absolutely live out here. Could they? Yeah. Okay. So these are just functions, right? Regular functions. Now we're using the arrow syntax, right? But it doesn't have to be the arrow. You could also, this works as well just on regular legacy functions, right? What I'm going to talk about is the parameter list, right? So let me show you the parameter list. Okay. So notice, right, that what we can do here is that we can here we're calling the difference subtract subtract, right? Oh, okay, no, sorry. Here like that. So those are the functions, right? See, these are the functions, add and subtract, right? And here we are passing values 1 and 2 to the add function, right? And there's nothing peculiar about, we're just passing two parameters, right, to a function that is indeed expecting two parameters. This is a very familiar, this should be a very familiar syntax to you, right? I pass two parameters and you're expecting two parameters, right? And the only thing that I'm doing here is that I am returning the values of a plus b. Yes? Now let's look at this other version, right, that I'm calling the subtract function. But notice that in this implementation, notice that I'm not just passing a and b, right? I'm passing an object. See that? I'm creating an object, and then I'm passing the object to the function subtract. Okay, so it is an object that has two properties, a and b, right? And so on the parameter list of subtract, notice that I am receiving, right? See the curly brackets a comma b, right? So that curly bracket, right, is being used as a destruct operator. Right? It's the function is receiving an object that has properties a and b, and here I am declaring two new constants a and b local to the subtract function that are going to destruct the object that is incoming as a parameter, and I'm going to extract the properties a and b, right? And I'm going to assign them to the local constants a and b. See that? So that this a and b gets the value of 4 and 2. Right? And then here, just compute the subtraction of 4 minus 2. Make sense? So this syntax of destructing in the parameter list of a function call, again, that's extremely common, right, in web development and creating components and passing parameters to components and things like that. And you'll see it, very, very often. Right? So I wanted for you to be familiar with the syntax. Let me import this into our lab 3. So this is function destructing, right? And there it is. So we're calling A and B, right? And we are printing out the sum and the difference. All right. Okay. Yeah. So that's a very, very common. We'll use that quite a bit. Okay. All right. So another common syntax of using these new concepts of spreading and destructing and whatnot, right, is in the context, right, of when you import and export. I mean, and we've been importing and exporting all along, right, in quite a few. But I wanted to visit the syntax again, right? Why our imports and why our exports look the way they look, right? And also some keywords that we've been using, for a while, but we haven't really covered what the syntax is, right? So in particular, we've been discussing about the export. We've been talking about defaults, right? In some cases, we've been using export defaults, right? And so let's revisit, right, and take a look at that syntax a little better. So first of all, we're going to create a library, a math library, a trivial math library that just does some arithmetic stuff, right? So let's create that, and let's paste in the content here. So this just declares a whole bunch of functions. It doesn't matter whether they are using the arrow function. Well, actually, it does matter. Well, the functions can be implemented either as functions using the legacy syntax like this, or or whether it's you're using the newer arrow function. Both can be exported, right? The same, right? But here we're using the function, the legacy function. So by exporting, right, these functions are available outside of this file, other files that can explicitly import individually, right? So some other file can import, add from this file, right? And you say, import, add from, and the math.ts, and we'll see that in a minute, right? So yeah, so each one of these can be individually imported, right? Now it can also we can also import, right, a collection of all these all at once, right? Instead of individually, right? We can import them all at once, and there are a couple of ways of doing that, right? One is by exporting the math, right? Exporting an object that contains references to each one of the variables of the functions, right? And then exporting that one object, right? And then you can import just math, right? And then say math.add, math.subtract, math.multiply, right? You can each individual one, right? And then we can also use optionally the default keyword, right? So export means that others can import, right? Default means that, hey, this is kind of like the most important thing that is being exported out of this file, right? And there's only one thing that can be the most important, right? And in this case, we've decided that math is the most important. And you can only have one default, one most important thing, right? And this lets you be a little less verbose, right? Be a little more compact when you import the math object. So let me show you. So let's create this file, right? That is going to do the import, right? So I can demonstrate for you what it does, right? So let's create here the destruct imports, right? And let's copy. Let's paste this in there, and let's take a look at this, right? So this one is doing. Notice what it's doing, right? Here it's you can individually import, right, from math. Right, so math is this library right here. Right, you can individually import them using the destruct operator, right? Because this import from math, right? What that does is that it grabs all the things that are being exported, right? Everything that's being exported, right? And it returns, right, the from operator, okay, returns an object, right, that contains references to all the things that are being exported in that. And so here what we're doing is that we are using the destruct operation. We're using the destruct operation to access these functions individually, right? So that we are assigning these by name, and then inside we can use it and to to add or stuff like that, right? So an equivalent to this is an equivalent syntax to this is to instead import everything. So import everything, and then here we can give it a name, Matematica, and we can give it a local name, right, from math, and then I can access each individual by using the namespace Matematica. Matematica dot add, Matematica dot subtract, or I could even do destructing the Matematica, right, and assign it to local variables, right, so that constants add, subtract, multiply, right, and then use it locally here. I could do that, right. Now the other alternative here that we're doing is that we are exporting also math as a default, right? A default, meaning that you don't need to use the destruct operator to to access the math, right? And that's the syntax that we've been using all along. We've been exporting defaults, all our functions, right? So that we can import them. That's why here function destructing. Notice we're doing export default function, right? So that in our index, we just need to import function destructing, right? What was the name? Yeah, function destructing. We are exporting that as a default, right? So that I can just import it without destructing it. If I didn't have this default, all right, here, notice that I get an error here, right? Meaning that, yeah, no, there is no default being, so I need to explicitly break, destruct it, right, to extract all the things that are being exported from that file, right? So default basically here, default allows me, right, to just be a little more, less verbose here, more compact, right, when I'm importing it, right? So that, because you're going to be importing this functions more often than you are exporting, right? Here, you're exporting this once, but then you will probably import this in a whole bunch of different places, right? Especially if you write components that are meant to be reused often, right? So whatever extra keystrokes that you can save, right, without having to destruct it, you can export that one default function, right? That is going to be the entry point, right, for everything, which is common here, especially when you're using React. React is something that is being exported by default, right? Now there's a whole bunch of other stuff in the React library that we could import, right? We'll do that a little later, right? But those need to be exported, right, imported using curly brackets so that we destruct all those other functions, all other hooks and whatnot, right? And we'll do that a little bit. So here I'm just illustrating, right, that example. So notice that in math, right, if this were not default, then math here would have to live inside of the destruct. Export. Oh, export. What are you complaining about? Math loaded, but it is not exported. It is exported. Module math declares math. Interesting. Okay, whatever. Yeah, let's put it the way it was, like that. Yeah, I need to see what's going on. All right, so we're gonna use default, right, to make it simpler, when you do the import side. Okay. Using the various exports. Let's use it, and I copied here some of those examples being used. Right, so I'm going to just paste it in here. So this just illustrates just a few of those functions being used, either using the math entry point, right? Math.add, math.subtract, or the name if you import the whole thing, right? So you could use it also matematica.add, matematica.subtract, or like we did here, right? We are importing them individually. You could use that instead, right? Here, like using just add or subtract. Okay, so let's import here the function, the destructing imports. So destructing import, like that, right? And so here we have a table, right, of using either this syntax, right, using math as a namespace, and then all the functions in there because we're exporting that particular object by default, or using Mathematica because we imported all of them and we renamed it locally to Mathematica, also using .add, .subtract, or just using the functions directly. Now, you need to complete the other ones, right, for the multiplication and division, right? Okay, so yeah, so that was a little bit a discussion about using imports, right, exports, and the destruct operator. Okay. All right, so let's discuss now the rendering of dynamic styling, right, using the style attribute, right? We discussed a little bit earlier. Also, let's revisit class names, right? And so that we can dynamically style things, right? Whether we want to display something in a particular color or background, but based on some calculation and some logic, right? We want to be able to convey some information, right? Perhaps using color or using some styling, and we want to be able to compute that on the fly, depending on the current state of the application, right? So here's an example of us declaring a few classes, right, in classes.css. So let's here create classes.css, and we're going to import, right, into classes.css these classes. Okay, which just declare a couple of background colors, right? BG yellow, blue, red, green. Although I might have implemented this already. Anyway, so let's use these, and then okay, they're used explicitly in this classes component. So let's create the classes component here. And let's copy the content. And what these classes do, right? They are just displaying a couple of these divs with a particular foreground color, right, or background color, and all declared here, right, with foreground color, background color, right? Oops. Right, and they're just being applied to this. So let's import the classes into our lab 3. So let's bring in the classes. So classes, okay, and there they are. So blue, yellow background, blue background, and red background. Everybody good? Okay. So yeah. So those strings, right? These strings here, right? These strings, typically they're just plain old strings, right? These class names are just assigned just pure strings, right? And that's all we've been using so far, right? But what I'd like to introduce you today is pretty much somewhat what we did already using the style attribute, that you can provide an expression, a JSON expression, where you can do that something similar here, right? But not a JSON expression. Instead, it could be a string, right? But a string that can be calculated, right? That can, based on some logic, right? We can choose to be of a particular color or not, right? So let's do this. So let's declare in the classes. Let's declare a variable called blue, right? And based on blue, let's re-implement. Okay, let's re-implement the dynamic blue. div, wait a minute, right? Dynamic blue, okay, yeah, let's do dynamic blue. So let's add that, like that. Okay, so now notice this dynamic blue, notice that the color is being defined, notice by a string that is being calculated on the fly. See that? Right? So this is a variable. This variable could be calculated from a very complex algorithm, right? Maybe whether you're logged in or not logged in, right? Whether you're a particular person with a particular role, whatever, right? We want to maybe paint this particular element, right, to indicate that particular status, right? So the way we're doing that, notice that we are using the curly bracket here, right? Instead of using the double quotes, right? Instead, we're saying that this class name is actually a calculated expression. It's a JavaScript expression, and our expression is a string. See this string? Notice that we're using the backtick. See that backtick there, right? This means that this is a template string that inside you can embed plain text, right? Like we're doing here, WD, BG, whatever, all that. But you can also embed expressions that are concatenated with the rest of the string to calculate the overall string, right? So if this is blue, then this renders blue like that, right? But if I change this to say yellow, when I say that, notice that my dynamic blue is actually right, or if this is red, then this changes to red, right? So right now it's hard coded, right? The constant is blue always, but we can we can think of examples where this might be the result of some complex algorithm, right? Some function, right? So let's take a look at another one. Here's dangerous true, right? And since dangerous is true, and you have this brand new div, right? And let's paste it. Let's see where above that. Notice that we have dangerous background, right? Because dangerous now. And notice that now, right? The expression, and notice that the class name of dangerous background is a little more complex algorithm, right? Here it was just concatenating a hard-coded string, right? Blue were being appended here. Here is maybe part of some more complex logic, right? Of saying whether this is dangerous or not, right? And notice that we have the expression as a ternary expression where we ask ourselves, is dangerous true? If it is, right, then this whole thing evaluates to WBG red. If it's not, then evaluates to WDBG green, right? So for instance, this is red because dangerous is true, but if this changes to false, notice that it changes to green. See that? So based on some, we might say, yeah, dangerous is true or not, right? And we might highlight something on the screen, right? So this is just to illustrate, right, that we can on the fly calculate what it is that we want to style. Okay. Now you can also do something similar or even more complex by using expressions as entire JSON object data structures, right? And to use that as the basis for rendering something in a particular way, right? So let's take a look at styles. So let's create a little style, right? And let's paste this in there. So okay, so now styles, right? And instead of using the class name, right, to paint something in a particular color, right, it's using the style attribute, right? And the style attribute allows you to only allows you to provide an expression. This has to be an expression, not a little string, no strings, right? Unlike class name can be a string, or it could be a calculated string, right, using templates. Here, style has to be a JSON expression, right? So here we have the opening and curly brackets for declaring the JSON, right? And so this JSON could either be like this, hard-coded, right? Where I type the name value pairs, the properties and the values, right? Or right, this JSON could be calculated on the fly, maybe by a function. You call a function, and the function returns the object that you want to apply here, or it could be a variable, right? So here, this variable is BG red, right? Background red is notice that what it's doing is that it's setting the background color to be like coral, right? It's a, I think this is the like. Plus, notice that it's using the spreader, two spreader operators to copy over the styles, right, from other constants. So color black is taking the content of that object, right, and it's just pasting it in here, right? It's as if we would have done this, right? It's as if we would have literally copied that over, right? And then we're copying also padding, right? We're using again the dot operator and copying over the padding that we want. So notice that we could use a style, right, that we can load or import, right, and then we can just use it over and over by just copying and pasting everywhere where we want that style, right? And then those objects that were calculated, right, they can be applied to the style like this. See that? Also, to notice that these are JSON objects, right? And so these values are all camel cased, right? No dashes in there, right? Now the values themselves typically are strings, right? And those strings could be expressions too, right? So this can be calculated, calling out a function or something, right? And then returns that string and whatnot, right? So let's include this in our lab 3. So this is styles, right? And then just prints those 3. Okay. All right. Excellent. All right. Okay. So here's an example of what I mentioned earlier, right? That functions are used to implement components, right? But up to this point, all our components have not taken any arguments, right? So here's our very first component that takes an argument, right? And it uses the destruct operation, right? So let's take a look at it. So first, let's create a component called add, right? And let's paste the content in there. There it is. And notice what's happening is that this is a function that is expecting somebody to pass it an object, right? That has 2 properties, A and B. And here, the function is going to destruct that object that comes in. I'm going to declare local constants, A and B, right, that they have to be of type number. And then internally, I can just use the values as I go, right? So here I'm saying that, A is A, right? I don't have a break here. Why don't I have a break? At least a space. Okay. And so there's a break. Right? And so let's import this and show you how is that we can pass these values, right? So we can say, we can import add, right? And add is expecting, notice that it's complaining because add is expecting 2 parameters, right? So I need to pass a parameter. So how do I pass it? Now, if this were a function, which it is, right? I would use the parentheses and pass it here, right? Well, actually, the way it's passed is, since we're already using the pointy bracket, XML syntax, well, might as well go all the way, right? So here we have values A and B. So we can use the attribute syntax, right, of XML and HTML to pass in those properties that you're expecting the object. So we can say A is equal to 3, right, and B is equal to 5, right? You have save, right, and notice that the add component renders the values of A and B, and there they are. A and B is 3 and 5, and then it renders the values of A plus B is equal to actual, 3 plus 5, equal 8. See that? So what's happening is that the JavaScript, right, parses this component, right, and the attributes that you are passing to that component and it builds a map, right, of all, and uses the name of the attributes as the properties, right, and the values of those attributes as the values of the properties of the object, right? And then once it has this object, creates an object of a equal 3 and b equal 5, and so that object gets passed into the add function, right, as an object, which you can then destruct, right, and extract those pieces, right, and then render the add. Yes. So we can pass arguments, right, in there. We did see a little bit of this when we were building the to-do list, right? So you might want to revisit the to-do list to see how it's used to actually build something, right? And then let's take a look at another parameter, right, that we can pass. Now, the names of these parameters, right, of the objects that you are receiving could be anything. You can declare them to be anything you want, except the keyword children. Okay, so a parameter, right, a property that you can destruct inside of a function, right, when you're receiving parameters cannot be children, because children has a special meaning in React.js, right? Let me show you. So here, let's create a square function, right, that does compute the square. So let's do square, right? And so square has this function. So let's go look at it, the implementation. So this function is it's called square, and notice that it's expecting. See that? It's expecting an object that has a property called children. Yes? And it could be whatever, right? It could be, I don't know what I can pass. I can pass string, integers, I don't know, right? But I am expecting this to be a number, right? And so I am making sure, and I parse it as a number, right? And now I have the number interpretation of whatever you pass me, right? And what am I doing here? I'm just rendering this children, right? I'm going to multiply by itself, right? And I'm going to render the square of whatever you pass me, right? So typically, from what we've seen so far, right? You would say, okay, well, here's square, right? And you would say, well, I have children 4, right? And it works just as you would expect. Okay, you have children equal 4. Yes, but there's also another syntax, right? There's another syntax that you can do the same exact thing, but using square, right? But instead of using this syntax, you can use the opening and closing tag. See that? And you can provide the value of, say, 5, right? And I save that, and it becomes, notice, 25. See that? Right? You can either send in values to the function or to the component, either by using attributes, right, or right by passing them inside of the body of the tag, right? Very cool. Okay. All right. So here's a little example of highlighting some content where, so for instance, if you pass me any content, I will highlight it by, making it, yellow on red on yellow, right? So let's look at that. So let's look at this implementation. So you're going to pass me. Notice that I'm expecting you to pass me just arbitrary HTML, right? It doesn't have to be a number. It could be anything. Just pass me. So a React node is a generic content that could be any HTML content, right? That you're going to pass me. It could be a paragraph. It could be a div, a header. It could be anything, right? And what am I doing? I am taking your children, right? Evaluating. So whatever you pass me, I'm going to just render that verbatim. But I am going to, before it gets rendered, I'm wrapping the content that you're giving me with the span, right? That is going to set the foreground background color to be yellow and the foreground color to be red, right? So that do a highlight. I can bring in the highlight like that, and then in here I can say maybe lorem ipsum like that, and notice that lorem ipsum here is being highlighted, right, with a foreground red in. See that? So yeah, so this is examples of using body, right, within the opening and closing tag of these tags that we're creating, right, and passing that content to the component so that the component can then modify it slightly. Yeah, very, very powerful technique, right? Okay, yeah, so we can parameterize the components either by passing data to the component directly using parameters. We can also pass data to the component, parameterize the content by passing it as a child. We can also pass data, right, across the URL, right? As you're navigating, right, we could parse that URL, right, and just and depending on the value of that URL, we can make some decisions on what to do with the content, right? And we did do a little bit of that. Let's see, did we? Yeah, we did. See that? This here. Oh, not that one. Let's go back. Labs. Right, when we were implementing this, we already used this logic, right, of using the location, right, to highlight things, right? So this this exercise, kind of like revisits that implementation. So let's take a look at it real quick in the table of content, right? In the table of content, TOC, right? What we did is that we use the location function in the React router library, right, to extract the location, right? And then in the location, depending on the path name, right? I guess there's no need to print this, right? Depending on the path name, right? We use class name, right, to dynamically add the active class or not, right? If the location path name, right, this here, everything after the slash after the pound sign, if it included lab1, then we want to show the lab1 tag to be active, otherwise we don't, right? So notice that this only one of these is true. Either lab1 or lab2 or lab3 is true. It can't be all true, right? So we're only adding the active class to only one of them. Yes. Now this could have been a function, right? A separate function, and the only difference here is the name, right here, that we are comparing against to see whether it's included in the path name, right? So we could have written a little function, right, that would return active or empty, right, depending on whether the location included this or not, right? So I guess that would have been a little more, neater to do that. But already we are using location as a parameter, right, to parameterize the behavior of this component. This component, behaves differently depending on, as that URL changes from one value to the next, right? It's being used to highlight certain things on the screen. Already good, right? So we can also use that URL, right, to pass specific values, right, as opposed to just parsing and seeing what there is, right, and running some logic, right? We can deliberately encode certain pieces of data in the URL, right, to pass them as a one screen to the next, or even within the same screen to itself, right? We can put stuff in the URL deliberately, right, and then extract pieces from different parts of the path, right? We can name them and then create a little object, right, that contains all the data in the path, right, and then use that right, to parameterize the behavior of the component, right? So for instance, let's take a look at another implementation of add, or I think I already have add. We'll call this add path parameters. I think I already have add. Yeah, I already have add. So add path parameter, and let's copy this, paste it. And so notice that what this is doing is that this is expecting, right? We are importing this use param from the router. And what this function is doing is that it's expecting somebody, right, the URL to have encoded some data in that path, right? And somebody named that path, the path elements by their location in the path, give them some names, right? And what use params is going to do is that it's going to say, okay, well, somebody built this for me. When I navigated here, and I guess we should also name this component add path params. That means that here it would have to have that name. Like that. Let's put this in the line. There we go. So somebody, right? In our case, we have inside of this we have a little route, right? And somebody is naming, right? When you navigate to that particular path, right? Somebody is encoding those placeholders in the path and giving them names, A and B, for instance, right? And then we can use the use params to extract these values by their names, A and B, right? And then we can run the logic of what to do with those values. Okay. So let's creating this add parameters. Okay, so we have that, and let's name it. Let's name it like that. Okay. Then what we'll do is we're going to create a component that has hyperlinks that allow us to navigate to that component or display or not display the component, right? So let's create that. So here, we'll say new path parameters, right? And we'll copy that. And we'll import this here like that. I guess it has to have that name. That. So basically, it's rendering this route only matches this path. Right? So path parameters will be rendered in the regular just lab3, right? But it's declaring these hyperlinks. See this? So that when we click these hyperlinks, right, it's going to append right to the end of the lab3. It's going to append add12 or add34. Right? So notice that the URL is already right lab/lab3. See that? But now we're going to be able to click these, and so it's going to do what? It's going to navigate to labs3, labs/lab3 / add12 and add34. Right? And so this route, right, it's saying that I'm already in lab3, and then continuing after lab3, if there is an add, and if there are two placeholders after that, okay, I'm going to name them A and B, which in our case is going to match 1, 2, and 3, 4, right? And so if it matches that route, right, I'm going to parse, the URLs, right, and extract the values 1 and 2 and associate them to A and B. Or if you click on this one, right, I'm going to extract the 3 and 4 and associate them to A and B. So by the time I get to add path parameters, when I extract the A and B by name, I can then, compute that is, either right 1 + 2 is 3 or 3 + 4 is 7, right? All right, so let's load the into lab 3. We'll bring in the path parameters. All right, so this is path parameters, path para. Wait a minute. Path parameter. There we go. Okay, so that's going to create a couple of hyperlinks. There they are. And notice not rendering the other stuff, right? It's not rendering add path parameters at all, right? Because the URL only has lab/3. It doesn't have this additional part of the path, right? Add A and B, right? But if I click on the URL, notice on these hyperlinks, notice that at the bottom you can see that it's lab3 add /1 and 2. So that's is going to append here. Is going to append here /add/1 and 2. See that? So it's going to append. So once I append it, notice that there it is. See that now add path parameter appears because the URL matches, right? The URL matches add 1 and 2 matches this pattern, right? And because it matches that pattern, it shows that component. But then the component, right, is extracting those placeholders that we gave them names A and B, right? And using them to compute, 1 plus 2 is 3. Or if I click on 3, 4, notice that it changes from 3 plus 4 is 7, right? So it's whatever I am passing as a parameter in the URL, parsing it out, converting them into integers, right? And then calculating the arithmetic addition. Make sense? So we're going to be using that technique, right? So that, right, in the canvas, so that when we navigate, we're going to be using it so that when I click on this URL, notice that here I navigate to courses, courses 1, 2, 3, 4, the ID of the course, right? We're going to be able to parse that out, right, from the URL, and then go fetch from the JSON file that specific course, right, and then render its name, its module, right, its assignments, right, the quizzes, right. So we're going to use it to be able to data drive, right, make this more data driven, right, and dynamic based on the interactions of the user. Okay. So finally, a word on debugging, right? So I would expect that you as software engineers in training, right, that you're going to make every effort to debug, right, your work, right, before coming to us as the TAs and myself. Obviously we're here. If you need help, absolutely. If you feel that you're frustrated and you can't get it to work, whatnot, please come and see us. Absolutely. But a good practice for you is that you should put enough effort into learning how to debug, right, the code if it's not behaving as you would expect, right? So let's discuss briefly what you would do, right? So as we've discussed already, right, we have the console, right, the web development tools that is available through when you inspect, right? And so this tool, we have been taking a look at some of the tabs up here, right? And the two things that we've been focused on the last weeks is just mainly the DOM, the elements part, and the styles. That's basically it, right? That we haven't looked farther than that. But now, because we have a whole bunch of JavaScript in here, right, we can also take a look at some other useful tabs, right? Here at sources, this is going to be your next, best friend here, right? Definitely the elements, the styles, and the sources, right? And in sources, you're going to be able to look at all the JavaScript that we've been writing, right? Which is available to you in here in the source folder, right? You can take a look at all the labs that we've been working throughout the semester, right? And here's lab 3, the to-dos, right? And all the TSX, right? And you can look at the code for each one of them, and you can put breakpoints, right? And you can step through the code, right? So in particular, for instance, right, where we were doing the to-do list, right? So the to-dos was under here. Notice that you can take a look at the the code that is being used to iterate over some content, right? So you could put breakpoints, right? Or you look at the data item, right? And for instance, you could put a breakpoint here so that if we go to the labs, right, we go to the labs, and that immediately there's a breakpoint, it's stopped, right? Because in one of the labs is rendering this to do, right? And it wants to render it and it's iterating over the to do item, right? And so you could see information about that iteration and see, oh, why isn't it wrong? Why is the status wrong or whatever, right? So now you could stop the code and see, okay, well, I can totally see what is being passed. Is this what I'm expecting, right? Is there some discrepancy on what I was expecting this, how it was behaving and how it actually is behaving, right? And you can hover here, hover your mouse and take a look at the values that are being passed in, right? And see the actual values, right? Here, to do item. First, you have a console. You have a console. And in this console, right, you can see that you can print stuff to the console, right? So for instance, in here, let's remove this, right? And in our to-do, we could maybe print, you do a console log and print the to-do object and print it, right? So now in here, right, put the breakpoint. Notice that this has been reloaded. We can see the console right there. We've got a breakpoint right there, so we can refresh. And let's go to lab 3. And there's our to-do, time to render, right? And notice that it did print, right? And at this, we can see the title, right? Buy milk, status canceled, down true. You can also hover over the object, right? And you can see, right, if it's the values that you were expecting, right? So you should make every effort to examine, analyze your code if it's not behaving the way you were expecting, right? So that whenever you come to the TA or myself, right, you already have some idea of what might be wrong, right? And maybe you need help, right, to realize what's going on, right? Also here you have elements, buttons and controls that allow you to step through the code, right? Or or step out of, step into. Also, you can see the not only the console that you can print out, but you can also see the local variables, right? You can put a watch to give an expression and see if the value is what you're expecting, right? Scope, you can see all the variables that are in scope, right, of this function. You can see the current value, right? So you can step through and see what's going on. Okay. Yeah, you can remove the breaks. You can see all the breaks listed here. You can remove all the breaks, right? Disable all the breaks, temporarily just disable them, right? If you have too many, you can just disable it momentarily and then you can say continue, right? Continue, it will just render. Okay. All right, excellent. Yeah, so let's take a short break and we'll come right back. And so we're going to use all these skills that we've been practicing, for the last couple of days, right? And I'm going to use it to revisit the implementation of our Canvas application, right? And so that we can use JavaScript, algorithms, functions, data structures, right, to make our application a little more data-driven, all right? Okay, let's take a short break. We'll come back right after this. Don't go anywhere. All right, so let's take all the things that we've been learning about JavaScript, right? How to implement functions and parameterize them and handle rendering and navigation, location, parameters, and whatnot, right? And let's revisit the Canvas implementation that we have so far, right? And so let's make it a little more data driven. Right now, the implementation is fairly static, right? So that if you navigate from the dashboard to a course, right? It's always the same course, right? So let's make that a little bit more dynamic so that we can use maybe a data structure that contains a set of like an array of courses, right? All individually identified by a unique identifier, right? Unique ID. And so that when you click, right, on a course, it'll navigate to the correct course, right? First, we'll need to perhaps render dynamically all the courses in the dashboard, right? And then, handle the navigation to each individual course, right? So let's revisit. Let's see what we've got so far. So currently we have this implementation of the Canvas. So this is the entry point to our Canvas application. Let's take a look at it real quick. Right, if we go to Canvas, this is the default navigation is that it kicks us into the dashboard, right? And right now, the implementation is that if I click on this, right, it'll always navigate to this one home screen, right, that renders the same set of modules, even if I navigate to a different course, right? Actually, they're all the same, right? So instead, what we're going to do is that we're going to create a data structure, an array that contains all these courses, right, and render this dynamically. Okay. So let's the entry point to our Canvas application is the Canvas component that can be found under Canvas. Here's the entry point, index.tsx. And right now, the implementation is that it has on the left side, we have the Canvas navigation, right, this left-hand side, right? And then on the right-hand side, we have a flex, right, that splits this into a left and a right hand side and a sidebar on the left, right? And then the right-hand side just fills the remaining portion of the screen. And then this is the routes that render either the dashboard or the courses or any other piece of content, right? Here, maybe it's a little more farther implemented than ours. So let's see. I guess this is one of the few things that are missing. Let me put that in there. Let's see the routes. So let me put that in there. Save that, like that. And so now a calendar just displays calendar, just a placeholder for the calendar, inbox, right? Account, and we'll come back to those portions a little later, right? And in particular, account to be able to log in and things like that, and identify ourselves and edit our profile information. But in courses right now, there's nothing there, right? So actually, one particular thing that we could do is to, if you navigate to courses and there's nothing there, it just kicks you back to the dashboard. That would be a nice thing to do. So anyway, so we have that. And when you click on a course, right, you navigate to the courses here, right? And then the courses then contains two things, right? It contains the courses navigation, right? That you have home. You can navigate to modules or the assignments, right? And then you have a couple other placeholders like the quizzes, Zoom, grades, Piazza, right? And then you're responsible for implementing the assignments on your own, right? So one of the things that we're going to do is that when you navigate here, one of the things that we have is that this courses is always the same, right? And right now it's just hard-coded. So how do we do that, right? First, we want to dynamically render all the courses, and then when we click on a course, we want to be able to see the content specific to that course that we clicked on, right? So let's see how we do that, right? So first of all, let's play around with some dynamic content, right? Let's do a simple one. Let's see. So let's try and generalize this implementation of this Canvas, Canvas implementation, Canvas navigation, right? Let's go in there. Right now, it's what? It's implemented as a hard-coded list of hyperlinks, basically, right? And so whenever you find yourself like in any software engineering effort, right, and you find yourself that there's a lot of the same thing over and over and over, right, that should immediately put in question, wait a minute, is there a more generic, a more generalized algorithm that could do the same thing, right? That maybe can take care of the things that are always the same, right? And so I can focus only on the parts that are different, right? I can optimize that, right? So here's an alternative implementation: is that instead of having these hyperlinks over and over and over, right? We could have maybe an array, right? We could have an array here that declares the hyperlinks. The labels are different for the dashboard, cores, the calendar, the inbox, the labs, right? And then these are the paths, right, that you would navigate, right? So for each one of these, you should always identify, well, what is different? Well, what's different is the labels, courses, dashboard, blah, 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 right? Also, what's different is these hyperlinks is different, right? But everything else, right, the class names are the same, right? Well, these are different, right? The icons. So again, we can have the icons here, right? As a parameter, so an array of those. And I also notice that right now it's we only have we can click on these. It navigates, right? It navigates, but it doesn't highlight. Right? It doesn't highlight. Okay, even though presumably we have enough information up here to be able to determine based on the location to highlight these guys, right? So we don't know how to do that. Right now, it's always this one is highlighted. So we want to generalize that too, right? So how do we do that? So here's an alternative, right? So we're going to first grab the path name. We're going to grab the path so that we know where we are, and we have to import this. So let's import. And we can display the URL somewhere. Let's see, where can we display it? Let's make this a little smaller. 100. There we go. Let's see where can I display it? Can I display it in here? The path name. Can I display it? Oh, okay. It's over here, but it's in black, right? So maybe we can change the color a little bit, and we can change the style, right, to be the color to be white, so we can see it. There it is, right? So there's the path, which is basically this up here. It's this right here. See that? So if I click on calendar, it'll be /canvas/calendar/canvas/calendar. So we have that information. Perfect. And we could, right, revisit each one of these class names, right? And then notice that right now we only have the dashboard as highlighted as background white. See that? So we could convert these into an expression, right, that turns it into white if the path matches this, right? If it matches that, right? If it's dashboard, right? If it matches this, then we would turn this white, right? Or if it doesn't match, we would turn it black, right? So we could absolutely do that, right, individually. But instead of doing it over and over in each one of them, let's try to make an array that can take care of this, right? A generic solution. So let's create an array. So let's create an array, right, and put in there all these. Let's see, all these that we have been importing, all these icons. They're right there, right? Right, all of these. And then what we can do, right, is just iterate over this array and render this, right? Now, not everything is generalizable. So for instance, the first one, the one that navigates to Northeastern, well, that one is kind of special, right? It's kind of like its own thing. It behaves differently than the others. Like for instance, we're not going to highlight it, right? We have this Northeastern, oh, actually we don't have it. I don't have it here. But if you click on it, it's not like you're going to highlight it because you're just going to go away, right? You're going to go to a different screen, right? So that one is we can leave alone and have it as a special case, right? So actually, I don't have it. So let me copy it here, right, and put it as the first one. That's this first hyperlink over here. And I don't have the image. I never downloaded the image. So let me do that. You can download the image. I think, did I give you that image? That might have been in the prior assignment. Let me download that image. So let's go to A2, right, and look for NEU, Northeastern. No, did I give you that? Did I not give you that? Download a sample file. I thought I gave it to you. Oh, there it is, Northeastern. The brand center. And you can download the image. I could have sworn I downloaded it. Let's see. Is it in public images? I guess not. Okay. So let's download the this image downloads, and let's download this right here, PNG, and download. Let's close that, and it should be in the downloads file. New. There it is. So it's downloads. I'm going to rename it. So I'm going to move it over to my images. And I'm going to rename it NU, that PNG. Right? And then in the navigation, it's images NU PNG. There it is, right? So I have my image there. Perfect. Okay. And so now if I click on it, right, it just opens up a different screen, right? So there's no point if coming in here and just highlighting it, right? Because we're not going to say, oh, we are in that screen, right? It's just opened up in a different tab, right? So we're going to treat that all by itself. Right? Also notice that we are using this target blank, which allows us to open up in a new tab as opposed to replacing our current content, right? So we don't want to navigate, always want to stay here. So blank is just going to open up in a different screen. Okay. But all the other ones, right? You know, this account and dashboard and courses and calendar and inbox, all those could be generalized, right? So here I'm giving you an alternative on how to so the account also is somewhat special, right? The account is somewhat special because the coloring is slightly different. The coloring is slightly different, right? This account, notice that all of them are typically red on black, right? Red on black, but the account is not. The account is slightly different. So it doesn't fall into this generalization, right? It's always white on black, right? And then when we highlight it, right, it changes to be, I think, red on white, okay? But all the other ones will behave the same, right? It's when it's not highlighted, right, it's red on black, and when it's highlighted, it's red on white, okay? So to generalize this, we're going to create an iteration here where we're going to iterate over the links, right? Not the account. Let's leave the account alone for a second, right? So here under the account, right, we're going to take the array of links, going to take the array of links. We're going to iterate over it. And also, instead of using the raw hyperlink, right, elements, we're going to use a higher level component called the link component. That is comes with the route library that we'll be using. This renders as a hyperlink, like an anchor in the DOM, right? It renders like hyperlink, but it's a higher level. It wraps around the hyperlink, right? And then instead of an href, right, it uses the to. The to automatically appends this hash, right? So that you don't need to use the hash tag, right? It automatically knows that it's inside of a single page application, right? And it adds the hash in front of it, right? Other than that, it behaves just like a hyperlink, right? So let's save that. Let's save that. And there it is. So there's our dashboard, courses, calendar, inbox, and labs, right? But now notice that as I click on it, it doesn't work. Wait a minute. What are we missing here? Calendar. Oh yeah, there it is. So inbox, well, labs, right? So we have a calendar, inbox. Notice that it highlights correctly, right? And changes the color scheme. So we no longer really need, even the dashboard works, right? So we no longer need the original versions of this. So we no longer need the dashboard, courses, calendar, inbox. So we're going to remove that. Even the labs can go, right? Right, so we have that implementation that I'm giving you, which is now better, right? We have inbox, calendar, plus the account is slightly different, So let's take care of the accounts all by itself. Here I am suggesting to use this code to replace the account. So here's the account. I'm just going to replace that. And if I click on the account, notice that it highlights correctly and puts it right on white, right? But when it's not highlighted, because it's the account, it's slightly different, right? I put it as a separate implementation. Right? So now you have a totally different new implementation, which is much general, and it allows you to create new links, right? So for instance, in the real canvas, right, we have history, studio, comments, and you can add that very, very quickly, right? We can say, what was it? Let's put this next to here. So we have, history, studio. So this could be inbox, history. This is history, studio, right? Help. Right, so you can quickly create new ones. Obviously, would be different icons. You would have to find other icons, right? And this is already working, right? You can click on these. The URL is different, right? And you can navigate through these and then provide the content and the component for each one of them. Make sense, right? So this allows you to create a more general implementation of it, data driven, so you can now just focus on what is the data that you need to render, right? And less on the actual templating, right, of the look and feel, right? It could be broken up into two different concerns, right? How is it that you render it? And the other concern is how is it that you represent it as a data structure, okay? All right. All right, so let's do the same thing, right? And the assignment asks you to do the same thing for the course navigator, right? To do that on your own, right? All right, so let's do one more thing. Here, I'm going to focus on doing the dashboard. So the dashboard is going to iterate over an array of courses, right? And I'm going to give you an array of courses. I'm going to provide you with one that has things like 20-something courses, right? And then you're going to iterate over them. And then instead of making them hard-coded like we have so far, right, it's these cards dynamically, right? So I'm giving you an array of courses. I'm going to download that. And let's see. And then I'm going to say the raw value. I'm going to save this locally. I'm going to say save onto my direct. Where is it located? I forget. We are. This is okay. SU1. All right. So this will be Canvas, source, web dev, SU1, this one. And so we're going to go into source, Canvas. So we're going to put it into a database, right? So we're going to just create a whole bunch of JSON files that we're going to include inside of a JavaScript file, right? That will make a little object that aggregates all the data into one single big database object. It's not really a database, right? It's just going to be just an object, right? Which we're going to call the database, right? And aggregates all this data into one place, right? And then we can extract the pieces that we need to render the courses, right? The modules, the assignments, right? The grades and whatnot, right? So in Canvas, let's create a new folder. We're going to say, call it database, right? And we're going to store in there a JSON file, JSON. And save that, and let's see if it worked. So in here we have a new database directory, and there's our courses.json, right? That has a whole bunch of courses like rocket propulsion, aerodynamics, spacecraft design, organic chemistry, and so on and so forth. Okay. So now let's create an object, right? That kind of aggregates everything. So in an index.ts, right? So under the database, we'll create a index.ts, which is going to aggregate all those into a single object. So for now, we only have just one object. We only have courses, right? Now, courses here, the syntax is doing this, right? Is declaring an object of the same name and the same value, which we can compact into just the name of the variable, right? So it's creating an object, it's exporting it, so I can import it, right, from somewhere else, give it the name that I want, right, and then I can then read the courses in that object, right? So now I can go back to my dashboard, right? I can import the courses from the database, destruct it, right? And now iterate over the DOM that I already have, right? And now convert each one of those divs that rendered those cards. Instead of having 20 of these cards, I'm just going to iterate over that array, right? So let's do that. Let's go to the dashboard here. Let's see, we have the dashboard and that index.tsx, right? Let's import the database that we have, right? Let's see, so we have here the courses. We're going to import them here. There it is. So there's the courses object, right? We're also going to need the link because we're going to create hyperlinks out of each card, right? So let's import that as well. There it is. And what we're going to do is that we're going to this is the row that contains all the courses, right? This row right here. This row contains all the courses. So here's one of them. There's another course, right? So we have all these courses, right? We have all these courses. We have a whole bunch of them, right? And so most of them we're just going to throw away, right? We're just going to keep just one that we're going to use kind of like a template. We're going to use one of these as a template. So I'm going to get rid of most of these. Let's see, the dashboard. So I'm going to get rid of most of them. We're going to just keep one of them. We're going to use that as a template. So we have just that one. Perfect. So what we're going to do is that we're going to iterate over this, right? We're going to wrap this as the output of an iteration, right? So this is going to be the output, right, of an expression, right? And the expression is that we're going to iterate over the courses, right? We're going to say courses, right? Map, right? That is going to take each one of the courses, each one of the cores, right? And it's going to render this expression like that. Okay, there it is, right? it took that as a template, and now it's just copying and pasting it every single time, right? So now we have how many? Well, as many are as in the course. Now, obviously, they all look the same. They all say the same thing, right? But we can change that, right? Because now we have the object, right? The object, the course object in there, right? And the course object has the title of the course, right? And so for instance, instead of this being hard-coded in there, we can see what the values are in the course. We can see what's in there, right? So we have the name. We want to render the name. So we can say, instead of hard-coding this here, we can say, take the course object in the iteration, right? And just take the name here. We can say course.name. Save that. And there we have it. Notice that now, right, each one has a different name, right? Rocket propulsion, aerodynamics, space design, blah, blah, blah. All of them are different. Make sense, right? Also, notice that if you hover over this, right, they all have the same hyperlink, the same ID. Like if I click on this, it has the ID 1234, right? But if I click on this one, it also has 1234 because the hyperlink here is hard-coded, right? It's just hard-coded. So instead, right, we can make this an expression, right? We can make this an expression and actually, right, this could be an expression. So this could be a template string, right? And so I can embed in here the actual ID of the course, right? Which it's this one, the underscore ID. Right? So I can put here an expression like that. You can say that this is the course dot underscore ID. See that? So now, right, if we go back to the dashboard, if I click on this, notice that the ID now is RS101. See that? Right, if I go back and I click on this one, the ID is RS103. Right, so I am encoding information in the path that in the course, in the courses component, I could extract that information and say, ooh, I can go fetch the actual name of the course, right? Or I can say, ooh, with that ID, I could maybe look up what are the modules for this course, right? And then render those modules or those assignments or those quizzes and whatnot, okay? Actually, let me remove this label there and the courses navigation that I put in there. This was only just for demonstration purposes. Yeah, there we go. So this is looking a little better, right? Let's see. Let's go back to the board. Let's see what other things I'm suggesting here. Another thing I'm suggesting to do is that to wrap instead of having a hyperlink in here, this hyperlink right there, to instead, right, wrap the whole card as a link, so that instead of having to click on just the title, right, we can make the whole card clickable, so that if you click on the anywhere, right, it'll navigate to the same course, right? So here here I am right in the dashboard course column. So dashboard in here, right? Let's close that up and let's put the link above like that, and let's close it afterwards. So let's close the link right there. Perfect, right? So now the whole thing is clickable. See that? Anywhere I hover, right? I can navigate. So even if I click on this corner, it navigates, right? Click and it navigates. So I no longer really need the inner link, right, that I had here in here, right? This hyperlink, I really don't need it anymore, right? I can just remove that, right? I can remove that. Right? Although I might want to keep the decoration. I might want the color, I might want the font weight. So probably I might, how did I do it? Probably I used maybe a span. Yeah, I use a span, right? So let me just keep that, right? So instead of a hyperlink, right, this is just going to be a span. And I'm just keeping the same styling, right? The color and the font weight. Okay. What else? I added some little rounding here, right? So that instead of this being, pointy and whatnot, I'm adding that to the card. So this card here, I'm just adding some roundedness. See, that's a little rounded here. right? And what else? Right, the description here, right? Notice that we are just having, it's hard coded. They all say full stack software developer, full stack software developer, blah blah blah. But in the data, right, in the course JSON, we have a description, right? So we could render that instead, right? So this instead of this being hard coded, we can say course dot description, right? Now some of the description is too long. Kind of very verbose, right? And so we could maybe hard code a maximum height, right, so that it doesn't overwhelm the content. And maybe we could show it maybe when you just hover over it, maybe as a tooltip or something, right? So I did add some styling that limits the height of the paragraph, right? So let me do that, and there it is. So I only made it two rows high. Okay. What else? Also, the button is also clickable, but it's irrelevant. This button is kind of irrelevant since the whole thing is clickable, right? So if you want to change that a little bit, you can as well. The core screen, for the core screen here, the name right now is hard coded, right? So if I navigate, regardless of which one I click, right, it always shows course name, the same course name. But because we have the ID now, right, in the URL, we could extract that ID by its name, right, which is, I think, a CID, we called it, right? And then we can use that to look up the course from the same database courses, right? And we find it by ID, and then extract the name and actually display the title, right? So let's we can take a look at the courses and re-implement that. So let's go to courses index, right? So instead of having this hard coded, we can extract the same courses from the same database, right? We can extract the ID of the course using params, right? And we need to import the params, use params. Now the CID can be used for us to look up the course by its primary key. Now we have the course. So now we can just display here the name of the course, right? We can say display, course.name. Course.name. We might need to make sure that it's defined. Yeah, we won't actually render it unless it's defined. Yeah, so notice that this is this AND operator saying that if this is defined, if it's not zero or null or undefined or empty string or it's something, right? And then we're ANDing it, then this only renders if this is different than null, right? Because this returns something other than null or something, right? So this will only render if this is defined, okay? So there it is, organic chemistry. If I go back to dashboard, right, if I click on this is rocket propulsion, if I click on this one is aerodynamics, and so on and so forth. I am adding this little sandwich icon in front of it, right? So let me add that too, but probably you might have done that in the prior assignment, maybe, I don't know. Oh, I'm also changing the color to be danger, or red, right? So let's add that like that. We have to import that, right? We have this little icon here, which incidentally in the Canvas application, when you click on that, right, it hides and shows the this courses navigation sidebar, which we'll learn how to do that a little later. Okay. We also implement the breadcrumb, which is this little blurb here that shows you where you are in the navigation, right? Home, modules, whatnot, right? So let's implement this breadcrumb in the breadcrumb using the path name. Right? Using the path name, we can extract the location, and using the path name, look at the the position and extract the whatever you're navigating. So here you have home, If you click here, it becomes modules. If we click here, it becomes Piazza. So we could grab this path name, grab that last piece here, right? And then use it to append it to the correct location, the correct here at the end here with the breadcrumb at the end, right? So yeah, so let's do that. Wait, why is this rocket propulsion modules? Oh, notice that the home, the course navigation, right, is not keeping the ID encoded in the URL. See that? It becomes like this bogus 1234 that it's hard coded, right? So we would need to fix that. And I think the assignment asks you to re-implement the course navigation, right, on your own, I believe. And one of the things you need to do is to make sure that it keeps that ID encoded, right, in each one of these links, right? Otherwise, notice that I navigate, I don't have the link anymore, and it doesn't find the course, so it can't render the title, right? So anyway, yeah, that's driving me nuts. Do I? Yeah, it does ask you to re-implement it, right? And so, to highlight it, I'm going to just re-implement at least the part that keeps that rendered, right? So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to do the parameters and the courses and the database, right? So let me go to course navigation and do the same thing here. Grab the ID, import the ID, right? And we'll need to find the courses from the database, right? And once we have the course, and okay, we're using the name course twice. Let's see, what is it complaining about? Module. Oh, maybe we have to go up one. Oh, there we go. So now that we have the courses and we have the ID, we can re-implement this. So let me quickly re-implement this as like this, like that, right? And this is what? It's a course dot ID, right? Like that. And same thing with this one, but this would be modules. So this would be modules, right? And this would be, I'm not going to do Piazza. You are going to do assignments, so I'm going to do that in assignments. So now, if I go back to dashboard, rocket propulsion, if I click on modules, notice that it keeps the ID there. See that? And I go to assignments, it keeps the ID, right? And so it's used, so it doesn't generate an ID that doesn't exist, right? It was hard coded, before we had any of this dynamic, right? So anyway, you re-implement this so that it highlights correctly and also uses an array, right? I give you the array, right? And so you can re-implement this course navigation, right, using that array. Right? So you're going to declare the links here, right? And so instead of this being a hard-coded list of array of links, you're going to iterate over these links, right? And you're going to re-render this dynamically. Okay, all right. Yeah, but let's go back to the breadcrumb, right? And we can use the location, right, the path name in the courses, right? Back to the courses, we can grab the location from the router, right? Let's implement that. There it is from the location, and then the path name we can extract with the path name we can extract, right, modules. We can extract this name right here, right, or assignments. We can extract that and just append it, right? Append it at the end, right? So let's do that. This greater than, it's the greater than sign. Then I'm going to take the path name. I'm going to split it on slash, right? Meaning I'm going to take all this and I'm going to convert that into an array of strings, right? And I'm going to split it by the slashes, right? And then So this is going to be one in position 0, 1, 2, 3, right? Or 4, I don't know, right? And then I'm going to take that position, that string, right? I'm just going to append it, right? So let's do that. So I'm going to grab this here, right? And then I'm just going to append it here like that. There it is. See, assignments. So this is kind of like a little visual aid, kind of telling you where you are in the hierarchy of the data of the website. Also, typically these would be hyperlinks, so they will allow you to, if you have a very long breadcrumb, you could navigate back. Right, it's like a stack, right, keeping track of the branch by which you have navigated through into your application. Right. So if I click on modules, this becomes modules, home, modules, assignment, right, and it tells you where you are in your application, right? Yeah, so do the course navigation. Now, what about modules? Right now, right, if I go to modules, this is hard-coded, right? It's always showing the same modules, but instead what we'd like to be able to do is that, if I go to rocket propulsion, I would see modules for rocket propulsion, right? But if I go to aerodynamics, I would see modules for aerodynamics, right? And so I'm giving you a sample set of data for different modules for different courses, right? So I'm going to download this. So save, and this one's going to be modules dot JSON, right? And then inside my database, I'm going to include that in the index. We're going to import those modules. I'm going to import modules from modules, right? And I'm going to include them here, right? So now in the modules component, right, I can import the modules. I can import the courses, find the ID of the course that is being selected, and then find the modules for that course, because these modules tell me what course these modules belong to, right? So I have a whole bunch mixture of modules for different courses. So for instance, we have here modules for this course, RS 101. Here's another module for the same course. Here's another module for the same course. But then for another course, RS 102, right? The modules for RS 103, right? So I have at most about 3 modules for each course. Now, for the introduction to rocket propulsion, I also have a couple of lessons, right, for each module, right, that I just made up, right? And they're a nested array, right, of module objects, right? So that if I'm rendering that particular module, I'll also render the lessons within that module, right? So these are the modules. So it's one module, another module, right? But then within each module, there's a whole bunch of lessons, okay? So let's do that, right? So I believe I give you how you would go about that, right? That you would add modules to the database, not really database, right? And you would load the modules from the database, right? And we're going to parse the ID of the course from the path, right? So in the modules component, modules here, right? We're going to import the params. We're going to parse the ID of the course, right? And with that course, we're going to look for the modules for that course, based on the ID of the course, right? So in here, we can, parse out the ID of the course, right, from the parameters, and then find what the modules are, in that course. Once we have that, we can take the HTML that we use to render our courses. Let's see. So I think it's this one. See that? I think that's the first module here, and that's the second module, right? So I'm just gonna, just remove that second module here. I'm just gonna keep that one module as my little template, right? And what I'm gonna do is that within the UL, right, I'm gonna iterate over my array of courses, right? And that's gonna be my outputs, right? And this whole thing is going to be an expression, right? And that expression is going to be the iteration over the course modules. I'm going to say course modules map, and I'm going to say this is the module, right? Like that. And it's going to render right? That line item like that, right? So I'm going to save that. And there it is. So we have 3 modules, 1, 2, and 3. And right now they all look the same, right? Because, right, I haven't specified the actual content of the module, right? But now if I look at the content of the module, we see that there's a name, right? Now notice that the modules that I'm showing are only the modules for that particular course, right? Although right now they all look the same. So let's list the name of the module, right? So for instance, instead of saying learning week 1, right? This is the name of the module. This would be, module that name. And now this becomes, fundamentals of aerodynamics, subsonic and supersonic flow, and aerodynamics and heating. Now, if I go to another course like this one, rocket propulsion, notice that I have a completely different set of modules, right? Introduction to rocket propulsion, fuel and combustion, blah, 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 nozzle design, okay? So yeah, so now I definitely have different modules for different courses, right? And are all hard-coded, but, we could, right, say that instead of having this hard-coded, this would be what? This would be, right, the iteration of the lessons within the modules, if there are any, right? So what we could do is say, okay, well, I'm going to render these lessons. I'm going to render these lessons only, the whole list, this whole list, right? I'm going to render it only if the module has any lessons, right? And like that, right? Save that. So only if the module has lessons, then I'm going to render the list. And if I do have lessons, well, I'm going to render them. I'm going to just use one of these as my template, right? Just one. And so this is going to be the output, right, of an expression, right, which is going to be the mapping of the module lessons. I'm going to map over them, right? And so this is the lesson object, which is going to render that content. And there it is, right? And right now they'll say learning objectives, but they do have 3 lessons each, and the lessons each lesson has a name, right? So this would be, instead of learning objectives, this would be, lesson name. Save that, and there it is, right? So this is history of rocketry, right? Rocket propulsion, fundamentals, blah, 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 rocket fuel, right? But if I go to thermodynamics, there are no lessons there. I don't have any lessons, right? But I guess we could add a few. So for instance, so here in aerodynamics, maybe we can use a ChatGPT to add a couple of lessons. Right, there we go. See, we're adding here. We can add a few more lessons for subsonic flow, supersonic flow, right? And we have one more here, maybe lessons for this. There we go. So these are lessons for fundamental thermodynamics, right? But if you go to a different course, right, rocket propulsion, you have a completely different set of lessons, right? That makes sense. Yeah. So having practiced this, right, having a chance for me to show you, right, how to do this, how to do it data-driven, how to parse the URL, how to fetch the modules, how to fetch the lessons, right, whether you render them or not render them. And so now you're being asked, right, to, on your own, right, do the same thing for the assignments, right, which you wrote about them in the prior assignment, right? I'm giving you a list of assignments, right, that for each one of the courses. So for instance, for course 1, right, you have for this course, you have these 3 assignments, right? You have these 3 assignments. And then for the course RS 102, right, you have these other 3 assignments, right? So you have like 3 assignments per course, right? So on your own, you're going to render this, right? So that if you go to course 1, you list these assignments. But if you go to course 2, you list a different set of assignments, okay? Then once you have that, in place, right, you're going to click on the assignments, and it's going to encode in the URL the ID of the assignment. Once you have the ID of the assignment, and you navigate to that particular, to edit that assignment, you would display the title, name of the assignment, only the name of the assignment, because that's the only thing I give you. I only give you the title of the assignment. So you're going to display here the name of the assignment. I don't give you the description. I don't give you the points. I don't give you anything like that. You can leave that hard-coded for now, right? Later on, we'll come back and play around with that some more, right? But right now, the only data that I give you is the name. If you want and create your own for points and things like that, just go ahead, but it's not required. And then also on your own, you're going to revisit the grade screen that you implemented in the prior assignment, right? Where you hard-coded a table with users, and then the assignments, and then all the grades that they got, right? So I'm giving you a list of users. So these are a list of users. Tony Stark, Bruce Wayne, Steve Rogers, right? A whole bunch of users, right? And so you're going to include that in your database, right? And then here I give you an enrollments table that says what users are enrolled in what course, right? So I think these are the IDs of the users. Yeah, see, these are the IDs of the users, right? The IDs of the users. And I'm saying, well, that particular user is enrolled in course RS 101, right? So these are 3 users that are enrolled in 101. This is 3 users that are enrolled in 102, and 3 users that are enrolled in 103, right? So if you go to the grades screen, right, for RS 101, you would see the grades of these 3 users, right? But if you go to a different course, you would see the grades of some other 3 users, and then some other 3 users, right? So that, and then you would fill the column of the users from the users table, right? And the assignments, right, for that course would be the courses, the assignments for that particular course. So the table now, the first column of users is dynamic, right, by the course, because you know which ones are enrolled in which. And then the list of assignments is also dynamic, right, in the grades table, because again, for each course you have different assignments. And finally, I gave you here a grades JSON, right, that says that this student in a particular assignment, they got a 90. Right? So that means that now as you're iterating over the grade screen, right, the table, and you're iterating over the user and the assignment, the actual object, the value that you're going to display, right, for the grade is, for a particular assignment has an ID, the student has an ID, right? So as you're iterating, from rows and columns, the ID of the user, of the student, you have the ID of the assignment, and then you're going to look up in this table what the grade to display on that particular column, that particular row. Okay. All right. Yes. So that is the assignment. I'm going to commit what I have so far. Feel free to use that and as your own, right, to get you going. Okay.